Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ryan Phillips, and I am a student at UNC Chapel Hill. Today's presentation is about making the most of arts and sciences when you like both. The title of this is inspired by the fact that pretty much any college will have a College of Arts and Sciences, which will be its broadest place to get curriculum. So you may be attending this presentation because you have very broad academic interests, or because you are indecisive when it comes to academic things, or maybe you're just here to take all the help you can get when it comes to college admission. Whether you're here for any of these reasons or others, hopefully I can help you. So let's begin by mapping out our presentation. So we're going to start by describing who I am, why we're here. Then we're going to talk about choosing colleges to apply to and successfully applying to those colleges. And once you've gotten into some of these colleges, we can talk about choosing the right one and deciding what to do when you get there. I'm including these last things because, as I mentioned, many of the people here probably are a bit indecisive and may want tips on all parts of the process. So, my name is Ryan Phillips. This is a picture of me, a good student in high school. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just saying this to give perspective on my goals when it came to applying to college. So this is a presentation for people with broad interests, and I'm no different than you. I am majoring prospectively in music and chemistry as a double major. But I also have interests in math, physics, history, film, and even other fields. So if you have broad interests, you're a lot like me, and that's not a reason to worry when you're applying to college. I applied to 6 colleges. I was accepted at UVA, JMU, Duke, William & Mary, and UNC, of course. I was waitlisted at Cornell, though I actually found out just the other day that I was officially rejected, but no worries. I am definitely satisfied with where I'm going. So this is my list. So as you can see, I applied to very different, broad-ranging schools that catered to my interests. So if you're a person like me with broad interests, there are a few specific things you can look for when applying to a college. The first thing is liberal arts colleges and universities. Liberal arts can mean a few things, but when it comes to college, it generally means a college education that can give you the best of all worlds of academic fields. You're going to learn a little bit of science, a little bit of English, history. So you're going to get some of everything, which will be very helpful in ultimately choosing a field of study. And with broad interests, you're going to want to decide a few topics you want to focus on, because many of you probably have 10, 12, maybe even more interests that you could imagine studying. I'd suggest narrowing down to at most 5 or 6 to even consider for majoring. But so when you're choosing a college, though, you may want to choose one. Oh, let me actually mention that I may be reading off the bullets here, but I will definitely take questions at the end if my explanations aren't clear. So with these topics in mind, you're going to want to pick 1 to 2 colleges that cater to each of those interests. So for example, for me, I was going to apply under either a STEM or an arts major, which I know is very different, but that's why you're here, I guess. So I wanted to apply to a couple schools under a music major because I knew I didn't want to miss out on the opportunity if I decided that I actually did want to study it. That is where I come to a very important term in this presentation, which is FOMO, fear of missing out. This is something that I experience a lot, and I'm sure many of you do as well. This is why if you have even some inkling of wanting to major in a particular topic, especially arts, because those are driven by passion and not necessarily research on your own part, I would highly recommend applying to at least 1 or 2 colleges under that major. And of course, in my case, that was helpful because I actually ended up choosing one of those schools where I applied under a music major. And like me, you also may be interested in doing dual degrees. So pick schools that don't have a high specialization unless you feel like you could become confident. If you are super into the arts and you think you could possibly end up wanting to major solely in an arts topic, you could apply to an arts conservatory. Or if you're super into STEM or science, you could apply to a school like MIT and go there. But I would suggest that if you're interested in a broad range of topics like me, not to choose a school like that that has a higher focus on a particular topic, or to choose more liberal arts-based schools. One good thing about applying to liberal arts schools is that there are schools with that format that exist at pretty much any level of the rankings, if that's something you subscribe to. Most of the Ivy League schools are liberal arts colleges. A lot of high-ranking public universities like UVA or UNC are liberal arts colleges, and many others that are ranked lower, which I will emphasize multiple times here, is not really as important as it sounds. Also, the one other important aspect of FOMO that I want to mention exists in the colleges you apply to. There's FOMO in not choosing to apply under a certain major, as I mentioned before, but I would suggest trying to get your research in on your particular universities as early as possible, because once the college deadline comes, the college application submission deadline, then you probably won't be able to submit another application. And if you decide that you really like a school afterwards, you're kind of out of luck. So I would suggest, as early as possible, writing your list, and if it's too long, that's better than it being too short, because cutting an application from your list is definitely easier than adding one at the last second. So here are a few things I think you should do with your application. One thing is to talk to trusted adults. These people are more important than you may consider when it comes to applying to college. In fact, I probably wouldn't have even applied to some of the schools I applied to if it were not for talking to some of these trusted adults. My clarinet teacher initially threw out the idea of applying to UNC and Cornell, and I'm definitely very pleased with my choice to do that. So listen to people, because even though web resources are very helpful, people who know you are going to be very helpful in determining what colleges are a good fit for you. But it's also important to know that these people's opinions are not everything. So if someone suggests that you apply to a certain college and it's not a college you're interested in, then you don't need to apply there either. And then one very important piece of advice that a lot of people don't talk about is that if you're proud of it, write it down. There are a few things that I put on my college application that I very nearly didn't put on my application, and some of these ended up being very important. I'll share a couple examples. So I like to write movie reviews. Yeah, it's a pretty nerdy thing, but I love doing that. And then another thing that I do is I have a Google Classroom where I promote positivity. I get people to compliment each other and affirm themselves and that kind of thing. It started off as a joke, but once I actually started to get more serious about it, I just decided to throw a Hail Mary and write it on some of my later applications, because I felt like, it's something I was proud of, so I wrote it down. And in fact, it actually did verifiably help me get in. I got a note from the Duke admissions officer after I received my letter of admission saying that that particular thing was something they found impressive, the Google Classroom. So you never know what things are going to help you get into college. And these college admission officers, there's no way that their system is going to break if you write something totally original or random on there. Unless you write something that is truly unprofessional or truly unimportant, then it probably will help you more than it will hurt you. So yeah, that Google Classroom is actually something that helped me much more than I expected. So, in short, if there's something you're proud of, find a way to include it in your application. And the other thing is, this is something you'll probably hear a lot. There are 3 levels: safeties, targets or matches, and reach schools. The thing is, it's important to apply to some of each. You need to determine what level of student you are and what schools would be a good fit for you. Many of you probably, if you're attending a summer session on college applications, you're probably pretty good students. So you probably have some idea of what kind of student you are. So a few things you can do is look in and out of your state, look at public and private universities, and use all the resources at your disposal. I'll talk a little later about what resources are trustworthy and non-trustworthy. But in short, it's important to apply to things at all 3 levels because, for one thing, safety schools are there for a reason, that if you miscalculate, then you'll have somewhere to go. If you have a target, that's a school that fits you. Should be pretty self-explanatory. And reach schools, because college applications are very fickle and unpredictable, you could end up getting into a school that you did not expect to getting into. So that's important. And then with all your essays, though I know plenty of people who decide to write their essays at the last second and end up being fine with it, I would suggest starting on your essays early, planning them very meticulously, and editing them as many times as you can. Get as many people to look at it as you can before you submit. One thing to take with a grain of salt there, though, is that if you are getting a lot of people to look at it, make sure the essay is still in your voice. Don't let people make major changes to your essay unless you feel that these major changes more align with the voice that you're trying to convey. The other thing is, as written there, if you're interesting, act like it. It goes along similarly to if you're proud of it, write it down. While I wouldn't suggest going out of your way to appear twee or quirky, as some might say, on your college application, if you have something that you find unique about yourself, maybe you should write it in your essay. One tip about your essay, or supplemental essays, your main essay, that's a different story, but your supplemental essays, possibly try to find ways to tell things about yourself or on your other parts of your application. And then after you apply, I'd suggest looking for scholarships. Unless you think there's a good shot of getting a particular scholarship offered to you by your college or one of the colleges you're applying to, look for private scholarships and get on that early. Luckily I received a scholarship from my college, but that didn't come until later. So I was looking for private scholarships long after many of the best ones were due. So if you start early, you can get the opportunity to get some scholarships that many people probably aren't applying for. As I said earlier, do not wait till the last second to fill out your applications. You want this to be the best version of your voice you can get. But I will say that it is okay if college applications aren't exactly perfect. I would say make it as good as possible, but once you've submitted it, do not stress about it at all. Because this is a very fickle process, as I've said. People will know what you're doing, and people will know the person you are from your application if it conveys your voice. And that matters more than possibly a small typo or something like that. But the main piece of advice I'm giving here is do not procrastinate. So some of your supplemental essays will involve asking, what do you like about our school? Why are you applying to our school? You should probably include some specific information there. I remember, at least in my application, the only ones that asked about that were Duke and Cornell. Those were, and also the honors essay for UNC. But these programs and these colleges are going to want to know you're not just applying out of nowhere. If you write on, for example, the Duke essay, why do you think Duke is a good fit? You could, if you cite some specific things, if you name some specific programs and opportunities offered by the school, they know that you actually do want to go there and that you didn't just apply because simply it's a high-ranking school. Speaking of high-ranking schools, please do not let US News rankings, Forbes rankings, Times rankings supersede what your view is of a school. Give every school a fair shake. Whether the school has an 8% acceptance rate or a 60% acceptance rate, every school will give you a college education that will prepare you for a career. The difference is not that a school with a higher acceptance rate will put you in a lower place in society or a lower chance of getting a job, but it will possibly environment of your school. That's the only thing that really changes. The fit of the environment. So in short, regardless of what a school is actually like, sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Regardless of what a school appears like on a website or a ranking, the educational value you'll get from it is greater than, or is more high-ranking schools, about top 20 schools, Ivy League schools, etc., is that these schools could be called a coin flip or a lottery ticket. That you getting in is not solely dependent on your level of qualification. That a lot of applicants are highly qualified. Let's think of the fact that Harvard, for example, will get a certain amount of applicants, 50,000 applicants, and let in around 1,500 to 2,000 people. Probably 40,000 of those 50,000 people are qualified enough to go there. But they don't have that many spots. So if you do not get into an Ivy League school, a top 20 school, or just any school, think about the fact that your qualification is probably still good enough, and that they just had to make decisions that could possibly put you in a good or bad position. So the reason I'm saying that is because I think everyone should try to apply to a couple schools that they think might be above their level, just because your level of qualification is only part of what goes into accepting. It's a large part, but again, it's a coin flip. It's a lottery ticket. So in choosing a college, there are certain websites you should and shouldn't use. So schools have their own official websites, and they are better sources of information than they may appear. You can get almost any piece of information from a school about from their website. And of course, university departments, school-sponsored websites and portals. Plus, you can use your school counselor. Plus, for scholarship searches, you could use Scholarly and FastWeb, which are not scams. Take with a grain of salt websites that use an actual ranking, like US News, Niche, Prep Scholar, etc. Because these websites, while the rank is based on something, the difference in the education you'll get between a school ranked 3rd in the country versus a school ranked 50th in the country is honestly very small. Yes, it may appear large, it may appear different in the level of prestige you put into the conversations you're having and everything, but it's all about you. So these rankings let off a misleading air about some of these schools, whether they're ranked high or low. Other websites, College Confidential and Reddit, also you should take with a grain of salt, because in that situation, people who essentially know very little about the process could end up getting a lot of attention or getting a lot of views from their comment. So one person's opinion that you've never met, whom you don't even really knows about the process, could end up influencing your opinion if you put too much weight on websites like Reddit or College Confidential. Regardless, those sites could contain some useful information. Here are things you should not use for college advice. YouTube videos that rank schools, because then you have way less access to the criteria for the rank. websites that may appear untrustworthy, goes without saying, and social media sites, because not including ones I've already mentioned, because these are often conjecture without backup. So when you're applying to college, you should look for facts. You should look for testimony from people who know what they're talking about. And with some websites, you won't know whether that's true. And here, I'll just go through this slide very quickly. The most important parts of an application ranked. Your grades, your essays, test scores, extracurriculars, rec letters, supplemental recs, and art supplements if you are submitting those. But I will say that for colleges that include all of these things, all of these are at least somewhat important. So constructing an application. Many of these things are things you've probably heard before, like be yourself, play to your strengths. One thing is to show strength under the major you applied under. That is, even though you may be indecisive, you may have very broad interests, that choosing one major to apply under, knowing that this is not your end-all be-all for your major, and trying to emphasize the accomplishments under that major can go a long way. In fact, I would say that if you know you're likely to change your major, and if you're not applying to, for example, an engineering school or something where it's harder to switch in and out, just pick a major where you do have a lot of accomplishments. For me, I actually applied under a history major to some schools, even though I likely won't major in history, even though I guess maybe that's something I'm considering. But I knew that I had a lot of accomplishments in history, and that people could attest to the fact that I had skills in history. So this, I don't know exactly how far this took me or whether other parts carried me there, but I can say doing that didn't hurt. So take tests, you know that. SAT subject tests could go a longer way than they expect. In fact, at some schools, if you choose to attend, your SAT subject test can count as your math placement test, and you won't have to do another one of those, so that can be a plus. So essays, I've talked about that. Don't underestimate the value of your accomplishments. In short, if you're proud of it, write it down. I've talked about most of this already, but let me say about art supplements. Sending in an art supplement does not mean you have to major in your art, whether it's music, acting, or painting, or whatever. But it simply shows that you have a skill that is not necessarily shown so far in the application. So if you send in an art supplement, you can show the admissions committee what you've spent a lot of time doing. And that definitely helped me. I will say, I'll mention again the letter from the Duke admissions officer. They mentioned that my art supplement was helpful. In fact, I heard positive feedback on basically all my art supplements. So of course I'm a clarinetist, I send in clarinet videos. So I'll say that if you have a musical, artistic skill, not just musical, then send in an art supplement. It will help you. I've said a lot of this. Again, with your writing, you should try to show multiple levels of your skill. Now let's talk about some of these, some of the criteria for, let me say this first, sorry. If you can, this is really one of the most unimportant things about your application, if at all. Try to get in contact with a professor or two at the department that you're most interested in certain colleges, because it can definitely be helpful, not only for learning about the school, but you can have an advocate on campus. For example, with UNC, I contacted a few members of the music department, including the clarinet professor and the wind ensemble director. And now that I'm going there, I have contacts on campus, and these people were definitely advocates for me throughout the admissions process and the scholarship application process. So getting to know some of these people can be a huge consider is from whom you ask for recommendation letters. So there are a few important things to consider. Teachers who know you, teachers you have a relationship with, teachers whose classes you've done exceptionally well in, or teachers teachers you know, like you, or know you. Those are the important things. Teachers who have seen you at your best, that's seen you at your best, seen you do things that you're proud of. That's important. And when you ask for letters, be very nice and courteous. So don't do anything that could possibly jeopardize the letter. Reach out either in person or with a very kind email. Don't just get to the point. You should, be kind and ask, how they're doing and everything. Oh, 10 more minutes. Okay. I will be quick about this. So, all right, so supplemental recommendations, that can also be important. You can talk to other trusted adults. I got supplemental recs from my band director and my clarinet teacher. That is something that was definitely helpful for me. Let's see here. Okay, so you've gotten into college, woohoo. There are a few things you can consider. One, don't be too hard on yourself. It's a very difficult decision. And then now you can choose with programs. Once you know what you're considering doing, you may be more confident in this now that you've gotten into college. Choose a school with that program, or that you think has a program you could do well in. And then if you're still unsure, choose one of your liberal arts colleges, one of your broader schools. And remember, with liberal arts colleges, or pretty much most colleges, there are options for changing your major. Okay, so talking to students can be a huge help. Not required by any means, because I know it's hard to get a hold of students in some situations. But talking to students can be a great source on getting true information that may be not on the Canvas website. For example, things that may not be so great about the college, or things that students like to do. You get a better vibe for the true environment of the college. And then doing that, you can also get to know someone on campus, which is a plus. Also, even though you have to decide by May 1st, there's not really any requirement that you decide before May 1st. You can take as long as you want to decide where to go. I didn't even submit my submit my deposit 30th, which was one day before the required commitment, and I'm fine. So if you're indecisive, don't rush to make a decision. But do consider the fact that your gut probably knows what school is right for you. I knew, even after getting into Duke, which was definitely something that was very exciting, that UNC was the right fit for me. And in fact, waiting a long time could help you. I mean, that actually probably was the reason I got a scholarship. So that's important. And an important thing to consider is the fact that every school will bring educational value. I've mentioned this before, but the most prestigious college you get into may not be the right fit, as is true in my case. If the most prestigious college you get into, if its radiance is blinding you from the truth, then it could be harmful in a few ways. One, you could attend a flawed fit, which is probably worse for you than attending a school that's less prestigious. Or you could end up in a lot of debt, which is also, of course, a big problem. The most prestigious colleges are often very expensive, even with their generous financial aid packages. So consider the fact that it'll be more expensive. So the question is this school better? And is this school worth $10,000 more than the next school if it's that much more expensive? That's a question you have to ask yourself. And of course, in my case, I did not get to attend accepted student events because COVID. So that was something I didn't get to do, but hopefully those of you who are applying to college now will get the chance to do that. And then, of course, FOMO, that's our good friend from earlier in the presentation. You can't let that blind you to the good things about the college that you're considering, because there are probably 45 or 50 colleges that are going to be quote unquote right for you, and that among your pool of schools you applied to, pretty much all of them will probably be a good fit for you. And choosing just one may seem like a hard thing, but once you've decided on that school and you start going, those other schools will probably eventually fade away in your mind. And of course, here's a list of other things to consider about the environment at a college. Distance from home, campus politics, which I find to be very important to me. Food and housing. Oh, I wrote politics twice. I guess it's very important. Oops. Social life. Do they party a lot? Do they not? And then other notable perks from schools you've gotten into. If you get a merit scholarship, can be helpful. If you get into an honor, that could boost the prestige level of a school. But of course, prestige is something to consider, but it's not the thing that you may want to consider most. So, confidence, that's another very important thing. FOMO, say goodbye. Start to embrace your confidence in your choice. Maybe you could buy gear for a school, buy merchandise, or join the student Facebook groups, get to know some of the people on campus. And then schools that you chose not to attend, think about why those schools would not have been the right fit. Thinking about why a certain school you're not attending would have been the right fit does nothing for you and does nothing for them. If you try to convince yourself that you've made the right choice through real facts and real feelings, you will find success. And then think about the fact that academics are really only half of the lessons you learn in college. College is not only supposed to prepare you for your career, but it's also supposed to prepare you for living on your own. So any college will provide that experience, of course, in different ways, but know that the college that you've chosen will easily fill not only the academic, but also the life lessons you're going to receive from college. So I came up with a little acronym. That's a lot of fun. In case you get rejected from a school. Here's what you need to do. You need to... The school that you applied to and didn't get into is probably a selective school. And that if you fill out the lottery ticket, you may not always win. You think about transferring. If you really, really love that school and you are unhappy with the school you've chosen, you can always transfer. You could think about opportunities, because every college will provide you with really amazing opportunities. And then you can think, most importantly, about priorities. If you spend your time worrying about it, you're probably missing out on other opportunities that are right in front of your eyes. Prioritize what you have and not what you've lost. Okay, lastly, I want to talk about choosing your major when you're indecisive, because even though that's pretty far down the road for some of us, I want to help you because I know you're probably indecisive if you're here. A few questions you want to ask yourself. What's something you know you can do for hours on end and not get bored? For me, music and chemistry, that's the answer. And then you can ask yourself, of these interests that you have a lot of interest in, for lack of a better word, which ones can get you a job? Which ones are the most practical? Because it's something to consider. While following your passion is something that I generally am an advocate of always, practicality is something that's unavoidable. So other important things, know that you don't have to choose your major at the very beginning. Know that the beginning of college is supposed to help you explore. And then of course you can double major or get a dual degree. This is always an option. They don't even have to be related. And I know those of you with broad interests probably have some interest in doing that. And then one important thing that people don't talk about a lot is that the program you do in grad school probably doesn't really have to do a lot with, it doesn't have to be related to what you did in your undergrad. Grad school programs are based on specific requirements, not the major you chose. And while the major you chose can be important, it's not a requirement. Okay, so I think that is all. Thank you. And I hope you all enjoyed my presentation and maybe learned something.